for you tonight, and I'm excited about the fact that we have lots of friends and family. And there's lots of chairs up in the front here if you are in the back and looking for a place to seat. There's about 8 or 9 chairs right up front here, and happy, friendly faces are always welcome. So the way we kind of want to structure the night is we're going to divide the evening into kind of 3 pieces, and there's going to be kind of story, there's going to be some kind of teaching, and there's going to be opportunity for discussion and dialogue and these kind of things. And there's going to be a couple significant songs that break up the evening. And so I'm really looking forward to the kind of the overall theme tonight.
Yeah, and I've been asked, I think, 14, 15 times, how you doing, Dave? Right. And I'm doing fine. And you know, for you and me, this is a very safe community for me, and I know for you too. And what a privilege for me to be able to just share some very personal thoughts on a very tough journey with my community of faith and with some other friends who are here tonight. And so, yeah, I'm feeling great and love to do this. And just acknowledge
your family.
Great to have my sons Richard and Mark, and Richard's wife Jillian with us, and my wife Adele obviously at the back. So hi guys, and Eric and Mary and Nigel back there too. So great to have family there tonight. Really means a lot.
Awesome. Just for those of people who don't know you, just give me a quick little synopsis. Most people do know you here. They're probably friends of yours and mine. But for those people that don't, and for people that might want to watch this on the web, tell me a little about what you do for a living and kind of what your background is as far as a professional journey.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, you and I have been here at Nexus since 2004, kind of main teachers here, and up till 2008. I was the clinical director, supervisor of CARES Counseling, which is a community-based counseling center here, and we'll might get into it, but after that, just found my capacities for being able to do that were just gone, and so I had to leave a career I loved. And a good friend of mine, Ken Bird, was the provincial director of the Christian Labor Association, and said, hey, we got a spot for you. I started in October, early October of 2008, and for the first 3 months, we just kind of sit in my office and cry a lot. And so and my boss Todd there, and just the folks there were just fantastic, just to give me a place to recover. And since then, I've gone, stayed with them. I'm now their kind of national wellness coordinator, and loving my job, and it's very exciting. So that's
very cool. That's great. So what I'm excited about is not just to hear your personal story, because I've obviously been there with it, but I've also I have been. Yeah, it's good. But I think it's a unique privilege for our community is to have someone who's not just journeying through this stuff, but who has the ability to reflect on it, give your personal, professional kind of brain to this, and kind of give us a way through some of this, how to think and how to help people.
Right. Now, part of this night is. You know, I mean, I love to talk about Sean, and I want this to be a tribute to my boy that I love dearly and miss a lot, both Adele and I and his brothers. But it's also an opportunity for me to say, I think there are some significant pieces that really do make a huge difference on whether or not, and that doesn't mean when you lose a child, any sort of serious setback in life, whether or not that's, you kind of move healthier and healthy through that. So yeah, for sure.
Great. Well, why don't you move us into our first video that's going to
you'd suggested. Why don't we just kind of watch the news story. So the day, November 20th, 2007, 4 years ago today, day that Sean died, that evening it was on Global. And so I've pulled a little bit of it, not the whole story, and then just a little video that I made a couple years ago for that. So we're just going to start, just kind of bring us into that day.
A memorial is growing tonight for a teenager who died this morning when a truck crossed the center line and slammed into his car. 17-year-old Sean Phillips died when his Volkswagen Golf was struck by an oncoming pickup truck in the 34400 block of Old Yale Road about 7:30 this morning. Police say slippery road conditions may have been a factor. All day, people have been dropping off flowers, notes, and lighting candles at the crash site. Family members say Sean was a fun-loving kid. Where'd you go?
Singing, where'd you go? I miss you so.
So Dave, take us into that morning 4 years ago.
Well, just a couple days before, because one of the things I was just so acutely aware of the first, few days was just how grateful I was of the quality of time we were able to spend with Sean the last couple of days. So we died on a Tuesday morning, but on Sunday, I took a rare night off from Nexus and went down with Sean, and we watched the Chicago Bears play the Seahawks, and the Seahawks won. And the Seahawks and Seahawks culture were a big part of Sean's life. Adele and Sean had season tickets for a number of years. We'd go down every week, and just so happened this was the week she let me have a ticket, and I went down, and we spent this great time of being together around football. And then on Monday, as the weird ways of things are, November 19th is Adele's birthday. And so we went out with Mike and Lorraine, and Mike's birthday is then too, and so we went to Spaghetti Factory with the two families, and we just had this great time of just hanging out all night, and then we got home, and Adele was working on an early shift, so she was kind of getting ready for bed, and Sean went with his buddy Adam to go work out, and then he came back around 10:30 at night, and I was watching a documentary or something. He was just going, "Dad, you're so weird, these documentaries you watch." And, we just had this share. Most of you guys know with your kids, your relationship with your youngest tends to be that kind of, you don't care as much about stuff, right? You can enjoy them. I've always said there should be a pension for the oldest child, because we parent them so harsh and weird. But with Sean, it's just this great evening, and so I went to bed that night. And so Adele got up. She was working early shifts, so she woke up and drove Mark to the train. Mark was going to Simon Fraser. He was home that weekend, and so I could hear them kind of, get ready, and then I kind of fell back asleep. And then after 7 o'clock, I heard Sean get up. So here's the thing: Sean was a premier baseball player. He was a very, very good baseball player, but near the end of the season that year, he started developing really serious back troubles, and his pain level was really, really bad. And so just at the end of October, he actually got diagnosed with kind of a serious degenerative arthritic kind of disease, and he was put on some pretty heavy-duty painkillers. And that morning, he was getting up before school to go to the doctor's office to get a new prescription because the painkillers weren't really cutting it for him. And Sean was a very courageous kid. He was almost blind. He played baseball, was almost blind. I didn't know how he could ever hit the ball. Anyways, but he was so tough and courageous. And, so I heard him kind of getting up and leaving. And, and it was a beautiful morning. It was kind of like today, except even nicer. It was clear and crisp and about -3, -4. Now, the roads in Abbotsford were slippery, right? Anyways, off he went. And I was kind of waking up, whatever. And so I turned the radio on, just kind of waking up, listening to Canuck stuff, whatever. And around 7:30, 7:40 in there somewhere, now I'm getting up, getting ready to go to work. And I heard the traffic report. And they said, blah, blah, blah. And then they said, and very serious accident in Abbotsford this morning on Old Yale Road, and you want to avoid that. I was like, oh, Yale Road, that's kind of weird. And just didn't think about it. So I got to work around 8 o'clock, and then we had, you and me and Heather and Quentin had a staff meeting at 8:30. And I remember us walking over to that Timmy's, and just, you and Quentin were talking something, me and Heather were behind you guys. We were just all kind of talking, and we came back with our coffees, got into the office, and now it's about, 9:15-ish, and we're having a staff meeting. And my phone rang, and I looked at it, it said private number. And I said, well, I'm in staff, and I'm not going to answer the phone, so I just kind of put it back in my pocket. And then about 10 seconds later, Trace knocked on my door, my secretary knocked on the door and said, Dave, the Abbotsford police are on the phone. I said, oh, okay, but I gotta take that call. And so I said, hi, this is Dave Phillips? They said, yes. And they said, Mr. Phillips, your son has been involved in a serious car accident. You need to go to MSA Hospital where Adele worked, and you need to meet your wife at her nursing station. I go, oh, wow, okay. So I said, told you guys, hey, I gotta go. And I don't know what you were thinking at the time, because I just grabbed my jacket and I ran out. I don't think I had anything to tell. And all I remember is that you were right behind me. So you must have thought, hey, I better go with him. I don't know if you remember what you were thinking.
Yeah, I just thought, you're going to the hospital. I'm going, why we're going to park and what's going to, I got to go with you. I'm going with you to the hospital. Let's go follow you.
Right, so popped in my car, and the drive, Cares is near Superstore over there, so the drive to the hospital is really short. So I get driving, and I think to myself, okay, Richard's in Calgary, so it's not Richard. And I went, oh, it's Mark. That stupid Mark with his dumb motorcycle. and then I went, no, Adele took Mark to the train. I said, oh no, it's my baby. And so the whole way there, Peg, I was just let it be broken legs. Just let it be broken ribs. And we pulled into the parking lot, it's packed. I said, look, can you park the car? He said, you bet. And I jumped out and I said, meet me over in emergency. Or no, you said to me, should I meet you over in emergency? And that's the first time they let me. I said, no, they said to me, down at the second floor in the surgery. I said, oh. So I'm running to the hospital and I got my phone and called Adele, finally talked to her. I said, Adele, where's Sean? She said, Dave, you got to come upstairs. I said, where's Sean? She said, just come upstairs. And I walked in the hospital and I got into that elevator. And this old couple came in and I just collapsed on the floor. And they said, sir, are you okay? I said, I think my voice dropped. And I got upstairs and the police ran me and took me into a room and one look at the bell. And I knew. And so they told me that Sean had died. And, you know, you don't know in the movies or whatever what that's going to be like, but I just started yelling, no, it can't be, no, it can't be, for about 30 seconds. It's like, you know, it's like you're trying to fight something off that's coming at you and you can't. And then I just realized, this has happened. And this little thought came to me, and I'm sure any guy in the room would be the same. It's, okay, I got to be the strong one here. So on my shoulders, Dave, you just got to pick her up. So I don't remember a lot. I remember I got on the phone, I called Rich, who's at University of Calgary. Just got his voicemail, so I didn't know what to do there. And then I said, I better call Mark. And he was at his basement suite in Burnaby. And I called him, and this was, I think, the hardest moment. All the moments. It was when Mark answered the phone. He said, son, you got to sit down. And I told him, he's such a quiet kid. He's like, Adele wouldn't talk. And I said, are you okay? He just wouldn't say nothing. So I asked Quentin to go, please go get Mark. And then a buddy of mine, Stan, who lives in Calgary, was able to find Richard. So, you know, we were there for about an hour, making phone calls. And now, they didn't bring Sean to that hospital. I guess they flew him to Royal Columbian. I think Adele was at Royal Columbian. Yeah. And so then we got into her car. You must have mine. I remember driving home, and it was about 10:30, and we're driving on the Mission Highway. And again, you guys, the day was spectacular. It's November. It's just brilliant, warm sun coming into the window, and I said to Adele, because what was on my mind at that point more than anything else is like her and Rich and Mark, and I just said, this is not going to destroy us. I'm telling you right now, this is not going to take us down. We're going to make it through. I don't know how we're going to make it through this, but I promise you, you and I aren't going to be over, and we're going to be okay. That's all I kind of remember. I've asked her, did she remember that? She goes, you were talking some crazy stuff. That's all. And it's so weird. I'd left my house 2 hours earlier, and I came back, and my life was changed. But that day, over 100 people came to my house. It was the most brilliant and tragic day, and I just sat there, and people came and loved Adele and me up, and they hugged us, and all my best friends in the world and family came to our house. I remember my friend Judy came up to me one point. I was sitting in the chair, and she just kind of got down. She goes, Dave, is there anything you need, anything you want? I remember saying, I want my boy back. You can't do that. So I don't know. Give me a hug. I'll never forget seeing my buddy Tom, and he sat over in the corner.
Like a lab.
He was, do you remember? He was there all day long, and he didn't say much, but and Tom was almost like Sean's other dad, coached him for years, and he just stayed there the whole day. And that whole day went, and then around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, we got a call from the coroner. the BC Corner, top dog. And he called me up, he said, Mr. Phillips, very, very sorry for your loss. I want you to know that I performed a quick autopsy on your son when he came in. It was high priority for me. We're going to do a more thorough one tomorrow. But I want you to know that Sean died instantly, that his neck snapped, the second of impact, and he suffered not for a second. And you have no idea what that meant to me, and I shared that with Adele. It was just, I mean, because that's what you think about. Was he crying out for us? Was he in pain? And to hear that, you know, he went quickly. In some ways, you go, all of us should be so lucky in that sense to just die fast, you know. And then somehow the day became evening, Peg, and I don't know how I went to sleep that night. And I had weird dreams. But then you get up the next day, and it's life is carrying on, and the news is on, and people are living their lives, and you feel like you're in stasis. And we tried to meet with the funeral home. We met with them. We tried to get through these conversations. Again, Rich came home, and I mean, I just felt so brokenhearted for my boys and for my wife. I mean, I had a good relationship with Sean, but Adele had a very special relationship. They were very, very close. And you know, and yet she was so, I don't know, she was so beautiful those days. She was so honest with her feelings. She wasn't denying them. She was crying all the time. And yet, I don't know, there was a grace about her those days that was just everything I'd ever thought Adele was came through in magnificence that week. And then we had the showing on Thursday night at the funeral home, and it was open casket, and so we were able to go an hour before, and it's the first time I'd seen him. And I remember just going over and Adele and I just kissed him over and over and over. He looked good. He did. How can you look so good and not be here anymore? I didn't know. And it was hard. And then all of a sudden, the place was packed with teenagers. John was a popular kid. And so the funeral director suggested to Adele and I that we let the kids write graffiti on the outside of the casket. So cool. Yeah, it was. And then for the next 2 hours, again, Adele would just walk over to these kids and hug them and tell them how special they were to Sean. And she was kind of
she was the mom for the whole...
She was. It was just a beautiful, beautiful evening. One of the favorite evenings of my entire life. And then the next day was the funeral. And I remember we're sitting in that room, and a couple of Adele's relatives were having a bit of a fight. I remember thinking to myself, that's more serious than this is kind of crazy, these little things that go through your head. And then we went for the funeral, and Quentin wasn't he great?
Spectacular.
I mean, he was our pastor at the time, and he was unbelievable. How he guided us so well through that. And Eric did this. Eric is Sean's cousin. He did this beautiful eulogy, and Lyle. And it was just, Todd and Shar sang those songs. It was a beautiful day, all on. And so then we went with just a few others, and we went and laid him to rest. And that was tough. And it was tough seeing him go down. And then we went back to the church, and then the crazies came out, man. I remember one guy came up to me. Remember this? Yeah. And he walked up to me and he said, I'm sure he meant well, but he said, okay, we're going to go get the boy. Okay, we're going to go get the boy. And I was like, hi, Gary, I haven't seen you for a few years. Like, thanks for coming to this, I guess. No. God raised the dead in Africa, and he's given me the power. And we're going to go what graveyard's he at? I was just like, please just go away. You're so it was more as just like, whatever, but
No, but you were so gracious to that guy. But that's that bizarre worldview that he thinks he's going to help you by saying this.
Why did that stick out? I don't know.
Because it was crazy.
It sure was. And then we got, again, how did we get through those days? I mean, there was, we had Mark and Rich there, and you guys, and Mike and Nolan, Tom and Carl, others just came and loved us. And what I say, you guys just refused to let us go. You came to our house every single night, and we started getting gift baskets from folks around the city that we never met. I remember one night, I think it was the Monday night following, got a knock on the door, and there was these 4 people from a care group from a church in town, and they're standing on our door with this, and they're bawling their eyes out to say, we just had no other way to tell you that we love you, but we were praying for you, and they gave us this fruit basket, or whatever, basket of stuff, and it, I've never experienced that, and to say, there was 1,500 people at Sean's funeral that came up to honor my boy. It just meant so much. And then it was tough the next week because Adele's niece had a wedding. And we were, we wanted it to be good for Amina. We didn't want to ruin her day. And it was an evening, it was a Friday night. And so we somehow stumbled through there. Folks were coming, hey, how you doing, Dave? And I'd seen him for years, like, I don't want to talk to you. I just want to not be here. And so we ducked out early. And I remember that next Saturday morning. That was the toughest day of all. So we're talking like 10 days later. And it was crippling. I remember Adele and I got up and went to the grave. And I wanted to die, and I know she did. And it just felt like I will never live again. The hole in my heart is not ever going to heal. I'm never going to be okay again. And Adele said something to me. She said, you know what, maybe in June when grass grows over this, we can come and just meet on a Sunday afternoon and maybe Saturday. Just something about what she said just kind of gave me a little bit of hope, and we picked up. And then you guys gave us that beautiful gift, and we were able to, Nexus Church gave us a gift, and we were able to go to Mexico with Mark and Rich. And I know Adele and I went for a walk, and again, she said to me, we're walking up to McKinley Drive, and she said, Dave, do you remember the movie Ordinary People? Yeah. And she said, do you remember how that mom got so focused on the son that had died that she lost the son that was alive? And I said, yeah. She goes, I'm not going to do that, and we're not going to do that. We've got 2 precious boys, and we've got to stay good for them. And she said, I remember she goes, oh, what it costs. We've got to get to live as a family, and the 4 of us got to start finding this, because there's no question, Mark and Rich were both closer to Sean. And we knew the 4 of us together was going to take time to find find that foursome, although it was an original foursome. And so we did. It was so wonderful for you guys to do that for us. But we were dreading Christmas, because Sean was a Christmas junkie. He was. As a matter of fact, we get stories about Sean and Christmas, but we got to Christmas morning, and I got up about 6:30, and I couldn't sleep, and I went down to my computer, and I sat, and I was looking out that window, and I just wanted to die. I was so sad, and the ache was so bad, and I just started bawling, just heaving, bawling, and I know some of you in this room know what I'm talking about. You feel helpless, and you're so wrought. And that went on for about, believe it or not, half an hour of this awful, ugly moment. And around 7 o'clock, and I guess I may as well answer email, because folks around the world have been just sending emails. And so I started to go through email, and around 7:20, and I say this because this was a bit of a turning point for me. I found an email that Betty Berg had sent me that I hadn't opened. And she said, Dave, I found this video of Alanis Morissette doing a song, and I think you might like it. I was like, okay, Alanis Morissette, whatever. So I clicked on it, and it's a video of her unplugged in a little club doing a song, That I Would Be Good. And she started singing, that I would be good if my life falls apart. That I would be good if everyone doesn't like me. And that I would be good if I was poor. And even if that I would be good if I was with or without you. And there's just something in the soul of that song, something that just said, yes, I want to be good. And this pain that I'm in doesn't need to define whether I'm good or not good. And I've told Betty this countless times, how that song just kind of really healed a lot of things going on in me, even at that early stage. And so we've asked Emily if she would sing that song tonight. So Emily grabbing down one of our, how you doing there, kid? Okay, so Emily's going to come sing. So.
Hi, Kevin.
Before Emily sings, there's lots of chairs up in front. I feel so bad while you're sitting at the back. Why don't you come up and sit down? just while the band's getting ready here, unless you really, really like standing.
We're a little
I have a guy with a sore back. I can't stand.
You get more. Yeah, that's
You okay with this? Okay.
That I would be good, even if I did nothing. That I would be good, even if I got the thumbs down. That I would be good, if I got and stayed safe. That I would be good, even if I gained 10 pounds.
Thanks, guys. That was fantastic.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Very beautiful.
Okay, we're going to switch gears over. So That's the crying part. We're done with that.
Well, I'm not done that, but no,
Everyone's at their tolerance. Okay, we're sad for you again.
No, Dave, I think it's. I'm glad you took the time to not this be. This is not an academic exercise.
No, for sure.
This is real. This is personal. I wanted us to go through those moments so we could feel this, so we could understand the depth of what you go through, what we go through, what people go through, so that we can understand the lessons that you are deriving and learning.
Right.
They have far more depth and meaning because of what you've experienced. So,
and of course, in the moment of shared grief, I mean, obviously, I know folks are like crying for Adele and me and Rich and Mark, and I know their hearts break. But at the same time, we're crying for ourselves. At the same time, we're doing our own kind of work. I mean, as I was hearing, Emily sing those, words that I would be good, and I mean, this isn't something we talk about, but you lost a son. I mean, you're not unfamiliar with grief. You lost your beautiful Joshua at birth, and I mean, you know the whole, and you know the feelings, and so many of us here have experienced deep loss, and so I know this is not just about Sean and Phillips's. It's about a larger experience of life, which is kind of where we want to go now. Just to talk to what have I kind of put together in my brain, because I think in some ways there's been some pieces that I go, I think my experience, our experience over the last few years could have been way, way worse. And so. Well, why don't you take us into that? Take us into some of the key metaphors. I like how you're using metaphors as a way for us to hang on to images and concepts that have helped you get through the last 4 years. Not just get through, but experience life. And I want to lead this up with an experience I had with you. You decided very early on after Sean's death, the next day, you said, I'm going to have a funeral, but we also want to have a wake. And I was like, what does that mean? And you go, I want to have a party at your house. Yeah, I'm Scottish, so we knew what would be happening.
And I go, what do you mean? He goes, I want there to be a celebration. I want people to have fun, and I want there to be a celebration of life as well as we remember the dead.
And I want glasses raised to this beautiful boy. Absolutely. And
I remember you did a toast on that night, and we were crying and laughing, and I was like, this is so, it seems like we can't do this, we shouldn't be doing it, and yet you said, this is the reality of life.
Right.
We live in this mixed world of grief and life happening at the exact same time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think those are the metaphors that have helped you get through. So
and you know what, I think, to be fair, and I'm not the only one to have thought and written on this subject, North America, we're challenged. We don't do grief well, folks. You go into other cultures, and they tend to be far more open and expressive and understanding. I don't know, is it because we are healthier, like literally physical health, we die later, we don't, infant mortality rate is lower. These are good things. I don't know if that's it, but I mean, the idea of the wake in Scotland or Ireland, or you go into Israel or whatever culture, they seem to have these rituals that allow us to express all of the spectrum of sorrow to joy, and so I agree, and that was by the way, it was a great party.
It was.
Yeah.
Walk us into some of the understanding kind of grief.
Well, I think the first thing, Peg, that I said, here's a few pieces, is to understand that grief, sorrow, and grieving are really, really good. They are very, very important adaptive processes for the brain. I remember there's a little metaphor, I've told this story before, but tears were studied, I think it was Harvard or MIT studied tears years ago, and what they did was they looked at the breakdown of tears that came from different sources, and so they put like peppermint oil under people's eyes, and people would, cry a lot from and so they studied those tears, and then they studied tears, they showed sad movies or whatever, showed the Canucks or something, and people would cry at that moment, and they collected those tears, and then they analyzed them, and what they found was that both tears contained a lot, obviously, water and salt and a few other things, but the ones that came from the emotional kind of genesis contained high levels of toxins as well. And what you see is that when we cry, our body actually discharges poisons, and not only does it discharge little poisons, I think it discharges kind of emotional toxins, and we get stuff out. And we know that it's a challenge for men to cry. We get self-conscious and we feel we're weak or we're not. Yet crying and sorrow and grief are so critically important for getting over loss. It's how we do it. If we're not allowed to grieve, then we're not going to get move towards acceptance land. We're not going to be able to get on our feet again. And so I think of grief as a river. It just flows. And as a matter of fact, if it left on its own, unless there's other things going on, which 90% of the time there is, but if it's left on its own, that river will kind of meander and make its way and do its work as it will. But what happens is other things get in the way. So while it's a good thing, and while grief and sorrow are really wonderful things, because what do? They invite others to come close to us, right? When we cry, people, they want to touch us and they want to be near us, and so we need the community. The depression of sorrow slows us down, so we can begin to figure out what's my life going to look like now that the lost person, the person that's died is gone? How am I going to put my life together? And there's a slowing down, and the body literally gets into this state where it says, hey man, you need to slow it down for a bit. You've got to recalibrate your life, and that takes time and it takes people. And the core tasks of grieving are often accomplished in this stage. I remember got one of the emails, well-meaning or whatnot, but it was about a month after Sean died, and the guy just said, wow, I'm glad that you're getting on your feet again and getting over this thing. And it's just like, I know that's hey, it's been a month, are you okay? And I remember, I talked to a friend who was a therapist, and a few months later, this was like April, and we went for a walk together, and she said, so how are you doing, Dave? I went, well, I'm still crying every day. And she said, really? Crying every day? And I was just like, okay, first of all, you're a therapist. You kind of should get this. And yet, I'm not upset at them, but what they're tying into is a larger cultural ideas about grief. Anyways, so you have this idea, that grief is a wonderful, fantastic, adaptive, good process. Cry as much as you can. Find ways that you can facilitate your grief. Some people like to write, and some people like to, write poetry, and, I like to do my little, PowerPoints, and, take other people's songs and make them mine, all this. And so that's all good. Having said that, a couple of things is grief is also real tricky, because it's not just as simple as a river flowing on its own. We have this thing we call compound grief. What compound grief is, if I've lost something earlier in my life and I haven't really worked through that, what happens is the next loss I face, that one's coming on top of it. And then sometimes you can get 3 together, and sometimes 4, and you become, the power of them can be just, I just say, too hard for people. That's why we need others to kind of walk us through. So that's one, you have this compound grief. But the other one that I just mentioned briefly, and we'll talk about in a few minutes too, is I see in North America, and you and I have talked lots at Nexus why this is, but I'll call it victim mentality. So that when we experience serious setbacks, whether it be someone we love has died, something very unfair has happened, maybe we lost a job or got cancer, so it's something real serious, we get into a poor me, like somehow the universe has gypped me. It's like the deal, what's the deal, right? A couple of weeks ago I told the story of a guy, a pastor that I knew well. And he was a leader in my denomination, and when his wife died, he was absolutely unable to reconcile how God could take his wife from him. And that was just like, and he fell apart. He left the ministry. As far as I know, he has not recovered from that. And it's just like this idea of that God he had honored God, and God had let him down. I remember you telling me, though, you felt a little bit of that when Josh died, that you said, this just isn't fair. It didn't fit, how I saw it. And so I think the victim mentality can be real insidious. Yeah.
You talk about this idea of hope.
Yeah.
You say that so many people get lost in the spiral of grief, and they just, all they can see is the loss. They can see that their life has no more meaning because of the depth of the grief.
Right.
And yet you say, hope is so vital. How do you find hope in the midst of that darkness?
Well, and this is really individual, and I hope, I don't want to impose myself on anyone else's grief process. We're all so very different, and it's just, it just is what it is. But after Sean died, it seemed I needed to, because I never obviously experienced death of a child, so, here I am, this psychologist, whatnot, I have to try and figure what's going on. So I went into the literature And it seemed everything I read was kind of telling me, well, you're like this, kind of. Wow. And I remember this one thing, and I bet you everyone in this room has heard this. One of the things we heard was, by the way, you should know this, the divorce rate for folks who lose a child is about 100%. You know, and you know, well, exactly, great. I love my child, I lose my wife. I may as well get fat, right? It's just sort of like, really, really awful. And guess what? That's not true. Like, folks who lose a child, the divorce rate is lower than the national average. I mean, it's just not true. But I began to touch like lots of these things, and maybe the worst of all was I got an email from a mentor of mine. Now, this guy, you know, for years had been a good thinker and a guy that, you know, had kind of come in, and I thought the world of him. And he had lost a son, right? And I hadn't heard from him for about 6 weeks. And he was one of those, do you guys know what I mean? Like one of, like, it was conspicuous by its absence, and I was waiting to have him, say, Dave, oh my God, you know, I can't believe that, you know, you're now part of the club that no one wants to join and all that, something along those lines. And I got an email from him, and it said, basically paraphrasing, I remember you were there, Dave, about it, and I was colorful in my language. Anyways, I got this email, and it said, you think you're hurting now. The next, you're in shock, and you're just touching real pain, kiddo. You have no idea what the next 2 years are going to be like. And of course he's just projecting all this stuff out of me, but I remember it knocked me on my back. Like I'm hanging on by a thread here, and this guy says to me, well, yeah, you're not even started.
I love the voice that you always give to that guy. Those guys. They're like half grown. Yeah, we were starting.
And so I remember one evening I was in chapters, and I was kind of, you know, I get drawn to the grief section.
I know that, by the way, I know that's terrible.
It's terrible about that. I want to read stuff.
Like, you're like, let's go.
I know.
You page it. Hey, Dave, let's go. I'm going to cool
Yeah, I'm on the floor. I know. And say, hey, where's David Bookstore? Oh, gosh, David Bookstore. Okay. Anyway, so I'm, you know, I got these 4 or 5 books, and I'm reading through them. And they're all saying the same thing. Basically, the death of a child is so horrid. And it is horrid. I'm not saying it's not, but it just was deflating me. Because I wanted to know that there was hope. I wanted to know that my life did not have to be over. I mean, and
defined by just that.
Right, because am I missing Sean? Of course. Am I in agony and pain? Of course. And yet I needed to have some sort of compass here that said, and you're going to make it through. And no one was saying those words to me until I got to this really cheesy kind of book. At least it was called 100 Quick Ways to Get Over Grief, or something like that. Grief for Dummies. I can't remember what it was, but it was by this guy named Alan Wolfeld. And it was healing the parent's heart when a child dies, 100 practical suggestions, or something like that. And I'm just going to read a little bit about it. And this is like, you asked me, what can I say to people who have experienced a sudden loss? I mean, I see my friend Bonnie here, and a couple years ago, out of nowhere, her husband dies, you know, and all of a sudden this card gets dealt her, and it happens to us, right? And so if you're ever able to say something, you know, believe me, we've all heard some doozies, but this is the kind of thing I found very helpful. Just read a little bit of it. So he says, if you're a newly bereaved parent, this is the very first line I read. If you're a newly bereaved parent, I bring you the message that you will make it through this. Wow. It's like, oh, I needed to know that. It's not minimizing my pain. It's not saying that, okay, just get over it. You're going to make it through this. Right now, it may not seem so. But deep within us are emotional, physical, and spiritual layers that comprise our interior landscape. The death of your child has affected every layer within you. Over time, and with the support of others, your grief will soften. No, it will never end. And it is likely that a day will not go by that you don't think about and miss your darling son or daughter. But your grief will become less sharp and all-consuming. It will take on the blurred, bittersweet qualities of memory. On most days, it will murmur gently in the background, while in the foreground, your life proceeds with purpose and happiness. Know that you will survive. All the veteran grieving parents I have ever had the privilege of meeting and learning from would want me to tell you this first. You will survive. If your loss was recent, you may think you cannot get through this. You can and you will. It will be excruciatingly difficult, yes. But over time and with the love and support of others, your grief will soften and you will find ways to be happy again. There will come a day when the death is not the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning. As time passes, you may also choose not simply to survive, but to truly live. The remainder of your life can be full and rich and satisfying if you choose life over mere existence.
Wow.
Isn't that powerful?
Wow, it's so beautifully done. And again,
and not minimizing, not saying, hey, come on, get over it. It's not, but it's saying that your life doesn't have to be defined. And again, I think this is transferable to all that we. If I want to invite us into the full feelings of sorrow and loss, we've got to also have a larger template to say this is not the complete definition of my life. There are other parts too. Like I said, I still have Richard. I still have Mark. I still have Adele. I still have my friends. I still have my mind, my career, my labor in this world. I have my health. I have lots of other things as well as I have this deeply, deeply broken heart. So I guess that's the second thing that I would leave.
You talk about, you used this before too, the idea of
How are we
the
doing
river. We're running tight, but it's okay. We'll get through some of these things.
Okay, fine.
The river metaphor. You talk about joy and sorrow being. You mentioned that a little bit. I don't know if you want to unpack that a little bit more.
You just kind of
you experience both,
right? And this is something that in our mindfulness stuff I'd worked with years before Sean died. But I grew up in Kamloops, and in Kamloops the word Kamloops comes from the Shuswap tribe, and it means the coming together of the rivers. And so you got this muddy, ugly little North Thompson River that churns and roils and comes down, and then you got the beautiful, serene, clear waters of the South Thompson. And they meet right there at the Riverside Park and Overlander Bridge, if you can think of Kamloops. And for about 5 miles till they get wonderfully polluted by the pulp mill, these two rivers run parallel to one another because they're different kind of textures, right? And if you kind of stand on the bridge, you can look down and what you see is this current on your right, on your left, which is clear and blue, and this river on your right, which is muddy. And these two rivers are running parallel with each other, and I that to me is such a beautiful picture of I have my sorrow, and it's real, and there are some days where I'm into that current, and that current takes me, and I feel like there's nothing but those feelings of loss and sorrow. Certainly in the first couple of years after Sean died, that would be true. And then, just like a river, it's got kind of its own peculiar little currents and flows. There will be times when that current lets me go. And if I can have a template for the dialectic, what I mean, the capacity to be joyful and sorrow in the same moment, then I can allow myself to move over into the clear stream.
And that's not a bad thing.
It's more than not a bad thing, Peg. It's a requisite piece, because if we are sad all of the time, 100% of the time, okay, then we die. Then we no longer have that je ne sais quoi, that life that makes us human. And here's the thing, the grief and the sorrow, even the deepest of life's losses, will let you go from time to time. It's like your brain says, okay, I'm over for now. I'm going to give you 2 hours off. And in those 2 hours, we need to move back into the sensualities of life, into food, into friendship, into song, into life, into our sexualities, all of it, into that which defines us as human and gives us that sense of life. Because just as quickly as it's moved you, you're going to hear a song or something's you're going to smell a smell, and then you're back into the deep waters.
That was a very interesting point. I remember a lady, and this is kind of a bizarre comment, but she had said she had lost a son. And she had said to her husband, I don't know if I can ever, she'd been married a long time, but she was, I don't know if I can ever have sex again.
Right.
And the husband was telling me this, and I said, why? He said, she feels like somehow in that moment of pleasure that she's betraying the memory of her son.
Right.
And you're saying, no, that both of those can happen at the same time. You can experience life and joy and beauty and the sadness of the loss.
And
one doesn't kind of trump the other.
And I've heard that, and I get it, and this idea that if I live again, I am somehow, it's well said, betraying the memory of the one that I've loved so dearly lost. And again, I would just say, Follow your own rhythms, because your brain and your body knows when it needs to cry, knows when it needs to be depressed, knows when it's down. For goodness sakes, for those first few months, that's going to be the majority of the time. But it's when it lets us go, then we've got to have the capacity to say, joy and sorrow are living in the same moment of my life. I am deeply sad. I am very close to tears. And I am so aware of how much I love you, or how much I love this day, or how much I love the labor that God has given me in my life. You know, whatever it might be, that capacity is really what is, in my judgment, maybe the difference between living and being the walking dead. And I don't mean that in any critical way, but I have worked with many, many, many people that they are so challenged in being able to do it, and I think part of it is because that conceptual framework is not there in their mind. And again, I'm not being judgmental. I get that we all have our own patterns of grief.
One of the other things I want you to talk about is sometimes with grief, not sometimes, almost all the time, there's a bizarre nature of how grief comes to you.
Yeah.
That you think you're just having a normal day, and there's nothing kind of on your agenda that might set you off,
right.
And yet you encounter it in really bizarre ways. And you use the definition, or the metaphor of fog,
right.
The patchiness of fog. Take me to a couple of stories where the patchiness of fog, in essence, allowed you to kind of be surprised
right.
by how it hit you.
Right. I mean, I've always, even before Sean died, and, you know, I mean, I've been acquainted with grief. I lost my dad when I was 15, and I lost my mom in 2004, which, by the way, you know, I've said, I needed mom. I needed mom those days, but, you know, so it's, you know, loss. But I journeyed through a lot of loss, and so I worked with a lot of people, and, you know, thousands of people through loss, and I love this metaphor of the fog, how fog lifts. And I don't think many of us have thought about it. And so often you can look into biology, into nature, and you see such great kind of truths in there. But we think that fog kind of lifts and kind of even, it just sort of dissipates, and now it's kind of, that's not how fog lifts. And like if you've ever driven, you know, say through the mountains on a foggy day, what happens is you're driving through the thickest fog. And it feels like your life is defined by, I can see 30 feet in any direction. You know, I remember going through the Rocky Mountains on a fog, through the Rogers Pass, just thinking any moment an elk is going to jump off, and, you know, I'll have no control over it. And then all of a sudden, as you're in this deep fog, all of a sudden, bam, you're in sunlight. Just that fast. My life was defined, and I'm going, if you guys know what I mean, it's almost like you go, wow, how brilliant the colors are, and then bam, you're back in the fog. And when you're in the fog, what? It's like the sunlight, what? Never happened. If you're back into the awful fog again, wasn't that just as a boom, and then you're sunlight again? And if you're kind of flying over top of this, you know the fog is lifting because you can see it lifting in patches, right? And you know that the fog is lifting because the patches of fog begin to occur less frequently, and they don't last as long. And that, to me, is the best metaphor I've ever heard about how I know that I'm starting to move forward, is that the fog patches seem not to last as long, and they're not as frequent, so they get little. And yet, here's the crazy thing. When you're in them, it's like you were never out of them again. So I remember, here's a couple stories. I remember the summer after, 2008, you and me and a couple of our staff were in Seattle. We're doing a little retreat. We're having this, you know, brainstorming session. And, you know, anything, if you do a brainstorming session with Peg, it's like you got 7 brains in the room. And it's kind of cool. The energy, and we were just great. Wow, we were having a great time. And then we said, hey, it's break for lunch. And we were staying downtown Seattle. And I was vaguely aware, because Seattle was kind of a strong city, right? The Seahawks were there. So I had him in my brain. I knew he was messing around. I knew the ghost was around. And but I was doing good. And it was like it was sunlight, right? And, okay, I know you're going to laugh. But anyways, so Peg and I were walking along, and you're going to buy something. I said, I just stop into this bookstore. I just want to check out the books. So I wanted this bookstore, and I started reading this book. Just on grief and kids, and then I'm just thinking with Sean, and you met up with me, and we're walking along, and you're just kind of yammering away, and the fog got so thick, and I collapsed. Remember that?
Right on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I collapsed. Downtown Seattle, 1:30 on a Thursday afternoon, and I'm collapsed on the sidewalk, just sobbing. So overcome with this. And I remember Peg, and you know, what to do at those moments? Nothing. Just, he got down on his haunches, and he just touched me, and he didn't look at me, and he was crying himself. And after about, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes, we just kind of got up. And about 10 minutes later, I was out of the fog again. And I was living again. And I was experiencing life. And I'm going to tell you this other story. So this happened, this would have been 2009. So 2 years after Sean, I was at my office one day. And just working along. I was just having a normal day, right? Wasn't necessarily in grief. And all of a sudden, it's like, what's going on? What's going on? And I'm bawling my eyes out. Like it came over out of the blue. Where did this thing come from? And it grabbed me, and I was just shaking, just crying for Sean. And then it was over, and I was like, what was that? Right? And so then, okay, I'm a therapist, I got to figure this out. So then I replayed what was happening, and I couldn't figure it out. So then, about a couple minutes later, I heard, now Pauline's a woman I work with, and her office is about, 20 yards down the hallway, or 15 yards, quite a ways away. And her cell phone had gone off. And her cell phone ringtone was Sean's ringtone. And it had gone off, and I couldn't tell you that I actually heard it go off. It was ambient sound. It's way out there. And yet, that little sound found its way through my thalamus, and my amygdala, my emotional brain, and said, that's Sean's ringtone. And my conscious brain's not even part of this. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm just having to send it again. Boom, the fog is there. And that I wanted to say that that's such an important moment. Those tears I shed in that moment, that we shed in those moments, are so good and useful. They're doing their work. It's like the brain is saying, okay, scrub some more, scrub. We're going to do what we need to do. Not that we ever fully accept loss. We don't. It's just, that's a misnomer. But we move towards it, and to get there, that's what these moments are. And if I'm saying we've got to have the capacity to open our hearts up for when that fog hits hard or that current draws us in, then we've got to have the capacity when it lets us go to move right back into life again. And not that it's easy, because it's going to be challenging to experience taste again, and love again, and life again. You don't want to. You feel that life has dealt you a very unfair card, and you don't want to do it. And yet, if you can open yourself up to it, it's that life is almost as healing as the other current. Yeah, it's very significant, I think.
Dave, one of the things that you've talked to us about, and myself, is that the worldview that we bring, that we have in our brains, prior to experiencing something like this, it really showcases itself in our lives. Our view of God, death, the afterlife, all this stuff gets brought up. Talk to me a little bit about how death really is that which kind of shows what we really think about the universe.
Yeah, and I think this is the one piece that really strikes me in this is, when I talk about core worldviews pieces, is that any of us need to think through, in the midst of just normal life, is what do I think about life? What do I think about death? What do I think about the afterlife? And what do I think about how all that works together vis-a-vis me? How that relates to how God or the universe looks at me and wants to treat me. And these are absolute critical pieces. Because after you experience these setbacks, and we do, I know all of us in this room know what I'm talking about. We don't have time now to do a bunch of gymnastics. We don't have time to go to a class. We don't, because we're doing different stuff now. And it's how we have put that together prior, I think, is key. And so here talk about serendipity. You and I, on the Saturday night before Sean died, were teaching a mindfulness class for couples at your house. Remember that?
Yeah.
And we were, we had like 15 couples there, and we were talking about all of this stuff. And I remember you and I were talking. We were talking about the dialectic, and we were talking about making sense of bad things. And I said to folks there, in my opinion, the ideas that Peg and I are talking about tonight will serve you and will hold true even if you lose a job, even if your marriage falls apart, even if you were to get cancer, or even if you were to lose a child. Remember? Yeah, I remember. And so days later, in the unbelievable fate of things, this card gets dealt. I've even thought about it, like, you kind of think of like the angel of death came to Abbotsford, and of the 100,000 homes that kind of found its way to Dayton Hills home. It's your turn. And it's not like a cruel joke or anything like that. It's just this thing that happened. And I remember minutes after it happened, I'm thinking to myself, God didn't do this. God didn't make this happen or even allow it to happen so I can learn a larger lesson or anything like that. This is something that just kind of happened. The issue now is, what next? Where do you go from here? And so one of my favorite songs that I would listen to all the time and talk about it Nexus was Green Day's Good Riddance, Time of Your Life, which we all know is, the final episode of Seinfeld, right? They sang a song. But the lyrics, another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist and directs you where to go. It's not a test. It's just a lesson learned in time. It's just a question. And you get to this thing that's happened, and it's like God is looking at me while simultaneously crying his eyes out over our broken heart, looking at me saying, this thing, Dave, this thing called life, it's something unpredictable. There could be some moments where it doesn't even seem like there's an order to it all. It's unpredictable. But in the end, my son, my precious son Dave, in the end, this thing called life, with all its sorrow and joy and pain and all of it, it's good. It's exactly what life is about. And at the end of that little line, what I believe God said to me was, I hope you have the time of your life with it. To which I would say back, are you kidding me? You want me to have the time of my life with the death of my son? And God says, not that you enjoy it, Dave. Not at all. But this is what life is full of. All of it. And it's good. It's all good. And I want you to embrace it and move into it instead of pushing it away and denying it. And that's why I think, not for 1 second, did I have a thought of this, why did this happen to me? It's just this thing that happened. And so at the funeral, we had 2 songs sung. We had, on the PowerPoint, we had Time of Your Life. But we also had Todd and Char singing, Does Jesus Care When We've Said Goodbye to the Dearest in Life to Me? And the chorus goes, oh yes, he cares, I know he cares. And as they were singing, I was bawling my eyes out, knowing that my Savior, my Jesus, was crying with me, while at the same time saying, have the time of your life with the kid. And so we're going to invite Mike to come and sing his own version of Green Day's Time of Your Life. I heard him practicing. That's beautiful. So Mike, come sing this song.
wrong, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind, and hang it on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos and memories and dead skin on trial. Something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. Something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life.
Let's thank the musicians. Just great. Jeremy and Peter and Mike and Emily, thanks so much for that. You know, I was going to just say as well, Peg, the other kind of bit of that, and just as, you know, while they're singing the song again, I'm doing it again just right now, saying all the stuff that's going on in my life right now, aging, empty nest, the stuff that I'm struggling with, same thing, God's saying, it's something unpredictable. I get it, David. In the end, this is this thing I created called life, and I'm happy with all of it, with the pain and sorrow. Hope you have the time of your life. The other thing is going to say, I know that's what God had to say to Sean. You know, I remember hearing this one thing just a couple days after Sean died, and it was in a YouTube video I saw, but I applied it to myself, and it was, if I'd known that the deal was that I get 17 years with Sean, and then I'd let him go, would I do it? And I would say, you bet I would do it. I would do it every day and twice on Tuesday, because those 17 years were fantastic. And I'll treasure them, and like I said in my email this morning, I just can't wait for that day that I see my boy again and say, I missed you so much. Tell me all your stories, kid. I want to know all about it.
Dave, you have, especially this last song and your lead up to it, it's such a far more robust theology and a view of the universe than most of us grew up with. When you have a narrow view of God and the universe that says that God is some kind of he's tweaking every minute and teaching lessons and punishing and doling out punishment for sin and then the kinds of questions that come up logically from that are, what lesson do I have to learn? Is someone going to become a Christian at the funeral? These are the silly, awful...
What did I do wrong?
Yeah, exactly. Was there sin in my life that this is what has to happen in order to me to get right with God? All that silly, and I use
very
silly.
Hurtful, very.
I use silly, but I really want to say awful, destructive theology that destroys people's lives. And it doesn't allow you to move into grief at all, because what you end up doing is you're back into the victim thing. You're back into this idea that I've got to somehow fix my life in order for God so He doesn't do this again. And yet, what you have given, and I think it's so much more congruent with the biblical text, congruent with how God looks at the universe, is this ability for us to say, God is not doing this and then and poking this and stopping this. Life is happening, it's unfolding, and God is grieving in the midst of that and saying, I hope you have the time of your life. I'm sad, and I'm with you in the midst of it.
And I think there's a movie that came out this last year called Rabbit Hole, with Nicole Kidman and Aaron Eckhart, and they're about a couple that loses a child. And, Nicole Kidman, as this grieving mom, goes to this grief support group. And by the way, we're part of a group, it's called Compassion Friends, and it's the most unbelievable group I've ever been with. Their courage, the stories these people, it's just, I'm so privileged to be with these folks, and they've ministered to me. But in this movie, she goes to this group, and this woman comes to her and says, well, you've lost your child, but isn't it wonderful that God now is an angel? And she goes, tell God to keep, make other angels. He didn't need to take my son to make an angel. And you just begin to see the limitations and narrowness of those sorts of responses. The other bit, just to move into this, whatever question, answer, or anything else you want to kind of get into, is everything I've said today, and I'm very aware, I've probably said it when I use the expression, I don't want to judge anyone else's journey. I mean that with sincerity. I'm kind of just giving you kind of my truth on this. This is how I put it together. Anyone's life is just so much more complex. And if I had to get into their shoes and see what they're facing, I go, oh man, I'm sorry to have suggested any other. These are just things that I've learned, Adele has learned, that we found useful in her own journey.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and we only have a few minutes left here. We really have to get going. But one of the things I did want to just say is all of us grieve differently, and I think one of the things I love of watching you and Adele is that each of you has allowed the other to grieve differently. Adele,
can you imagine what it's like being with me? I'm like out all the time. Let me tell everybody about Sean.
Yeah, and she's like, I just kind of want to be alone.
I'm very much private than you.
And you guys, you want to talk differently about him, and you experience things differently, and she allows you the freedom to do that, and sometimes thinks you're crazy, and sometimes...
Well, we'll be going to a party or something. This especially was true in the first year or two, and Adele might say to me, and she did say to me, okay, can you not talk about Sean? Right. And I was like, I love talking about Sean. But I don't, and I don't have that in public. I feel much less prepared to be verbal like you, and it's hard for me. And she'll talk about stories. She'll be nursing in the hospital, and someone will come up and say, oh, you Sean Phillips, Mama, they are so well-intentioned. She goes, that's very, very hard for me. And so we have very, very different styles of how we grieve. And I've even said, it's so easy for me to sit up here and talk about, working with my grief, Sean. I did not have the relationship she did. Her relationship with Sean was far deeper, and I just, sometimes it's like when she's grieving, it's kind of like holy ground. I just got to have a lot of deference for her process, and I think she has shown twice the courage and twice the capacity.
Absolutely, I agree. But I just love watching both of you do that, and just the ability to be able to let each other and all of us grieve differently. And I think that's a great piece. Maybe we'll kind of leave it at that. I mean, one of the other things I wanted to just comment on was the other thing I've watched while you guys have gone through this is your ability to invite others into that process is beautiful. Now, again, not everyone can do that, but your ability to send out emails to friends and say, here's what's going on, or send out, talk publicly, and it allows so many of us go, we don't know, do we want to bring it up and say, and you're like, yes, bring it up, we're fine, we're thinking about it anyway, so don't be like, what, I forgot it, now you brought it up, that's never going to happen.
He died? What are you talking about?
Exactly, it was all done, now you brought it up again, you're like, no, what's...
Yeah, but I get it, because I feel the same thing when someone else is going, should I be? So I mean, that's human, right?
But what I've loved is that you guys have modeled the idea of bringing people in. And I think that's one of the things I've learned, both through Heather and our experience and watching you guys, is that grief it's individual and deeply personal, but it's got to be done in a community. Right. It's got to be done with others around. You've got to allow others in. Those that shield and push away, as well-intentioned as they think that's going to work because they just don't know what to do with other people, they have a far more difficult time getting through this process. I think you guys are as healthy as you are because you have really great friends that you've invited in and say, can you experience this with me? And it's been an absolute privilege for this community and myself to grieve with you.
Thanks, Peg. And I would say that, you remember the Sunday after Sean died? Mm-hmm. You, me, and Quentin, we sat up, we said, we're going to have a conversation about this. And I remember folks saying, almost like, how dare you? Well, not how dare you, but
it's bizarre.
You really shouldn't. Is that like, you're kind of in shock? And yet, to me, it was like, this is my conduit, right? This is talking to my community of faith and to you and Q about, and us having this round table about, how bad things happen and whatnot was healing for me. And I've said, many times, Nexus, and, my close family, my friends in this community of faith have saved my life. There's no question.
Dave, I want to give time to this. You have a 5-minute tribute to Sean, and it's beautiful, and you did a great job artistically of bringing the videos and the stories, and you really get a feel for him. Yeah, it's beautiful. Just set it up.
So just a few little pieces. It's actually on the second version. I made a 30-minute video, and this is like just little bits and pieces. But so it's set to Into the West, Annie Lennox song at the end of Lord of the Rings, and I just love the tone of the song. And it's the idea is, you're leaving me for a while. You're going away. And it's got sort of a sweet sorrow to it that I just love. And it's a beautiful picture. Shawnee was a little baby. I just love that picture. But then after that first little bit, there's one of my favorite little pictures in this. Like, it's like when you make kind of a PowerPoint, all the pictures you have a bit of a relationship with. Well, one of my favorite ones is, she's, with Annie Lennox's song says, safe in my arms. And this picture of Jesus just hugging Sean. And I almost cry every time I see that one because I think of, Adele said the hardest thing for her to see Sean was that she couldn't be there to protect him. And that she wasn't even allowed to see him. But at some very limited, muted level to know that he's safe with the Lord has meant so much. But then you're going to hear a guy, his name's Lyle, and he was, his son was one of Sean's best friends, and Lyle was, within the baseball world with us. And Lyle spoke at the funeral, and he says a few things that are great. And then the last bit, we get into The Lovely Bones. And The Lovely Bones, Alice Sebold's book about Susie, who's murdered, a teenage girl that's murdered, and then the rest of the book she narrates from heaven, and she watches her family go through the process of grief as she watches them go through it. She's got this metaphor called The Lovely Bones, and it's very subtle. You've got to catch it. She's not saying that my death was the purpose for these lovely bones. that it was from my death that this new skeleton emerged, which is the lovely bones. And she talks, it's Alice Sebold actually narrating the book there that you're going to hear. And I love this metaphor because I look at my beautiful daughter-in-law, Jillian, who's new to our family. I just love her. I've got new life. And I think of Eric and Mary have had a couple kids, and my family is starting to grow, and my friendships continue to grow and thrive, and my life at Clack grows and thrives, and I just say, these are the lovely bones that have emerged, not because they're purposed by Sean's death, but in the decision to keep living in the aftermath of it. And so that's how it ends. So after that, what do we just kind of...
I'll close it.
Sleep. Now, Sean was also our hero. He helped save my son's life. We'll be eternally grateful for Sean and his efforts. We really, really love him so much. And I just say I think to myself, can you imagine what this world would be like if everybody was like that kid? I mean, geez, it would be an amazing place to live. You never knew it at the time, but as you can see around you, he's touched a lot of lives at 17 years of age. He's touched more people than most people that are 80 years old.
I wanted to say that I'm glad that Mrs. Salmon is home, and that Mr. Salmon is home too, and that I'm honored to be marrying their beautiful daughter. "Hear, hear," my father said. My mother stood to hold the tray for Grandma Lynn, and together they distributed the glasses across the room. As I watched my family sip champagne, I thought about how their lives trailed backward and forward from my death, and then I saw, as Samuel took the daring step of kissing Lindsay in a room full of family, became borne aloft, away from it. These were the lovely bones that had grown around my absence, the connections, sometimes tenuous, sometimes made at great cost, but often magnificent, that happened after I was gone. And I began to see things in a way that let me hold the world without me in it. The events that my death brought were merely the bones of a body that would become whole at some unpredictable time in the future. The price of what I came to see as this miraculous body had been my life.
Dave, thanks for a gift. Tonight was an absolute gift that you would allow us into your life. Again, 4 years since that event, and yet to see you and your life and your friends in this community grow, even this building is part of the lovely bones that are growing around our life. And I want to give thanks to you and Adele and Richard and Sean and Mark and I just look at the family that you guys are in the community, and I just feel an absolute privilege on behalf of this community. We just want to say we love you guys. We love you so much, and thank you for bringing us in and allowing us to share in this process. Thank you guys so much. It was a rich night, and I hope that you guys feel kind of lucky to be a part of this, and that's how I feel. I feel really lucky, and I think we learned a lot and cried and all that stuff. So, but it's an absolute privilege for us to do this as a community, and I want to thank you. So, if you get a chance, you can say hi to to Dave and Adele and wish them well. And this is the 4th anniversary of Sean's death. And our hope is that you would use this as an opportunity to reach out to someone who's going through grief and loss, that you wouldn't feel nervous and scared and shy around this, but this would be an opportunity that you would say, hey, I feel emboldened to reach out and touch and connect with people, and or yourself, be able to invite others in. So we really hope that this doesn't just stay here as an interesting experience that you watched, but as something that emboldens you to say, I want to be a person who enters into people's lives and walks them through pain and loss of all different kinds. That's our hope. Next week we are back in. It's a potluck, and we're back in here, and we're going to eat together, and I'll bring some insights from the Book of Mark, and we'll have a great time together and celebrate. So again, thanks again so much for coming out. Have a great evening. Good night.